Welcome everybody to the Swiss Sports Show. Very big episode here today. This is the second episode of season 2 of the Swiss Sports Show. We got a returning guest, none other than Big East Providence Friars expert Kyle Mcshane. Kyle, how we doing?
Not too bad, man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. And perhaps our biggest guest on the Swiss Sports Show, a media member that I met at the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden, the host of Sideline Sports Network, which some of you may have heard of before, J.B.Ellis. J.B., how we doing?
Good. How's it going, guys?
Good. So before we get into the podcast and stuff like that, JB, tell us a little bit about yourself and what Sideline Sports is all about.
So Sideline Sports is going into its 4th year. We've covered the last 4 Super Bowls, covered the Big East tournament. We're very big in the NFL community. We cover all the major sports and sports events. Any big event, we're probably going to be there. We're on Alumni Media, which is run by Gus Farrat, former NFL quarterback. My co-host is Dave DeRocher, former NFL player, John Shear, and Rafael Esparza, who's the top handicapper in the world. So we cover everything from gambling to sports. We have a good time.
Yeah, and if you guys want to check out Sideline Sports Network, I will put a link in the description below. Anyways, let's get into the show now. So before we get into the Big East breakdown, let's talk a little bit about some names who are questionable to be even first-round picks anymore. And that one of those guys is Baylor Scheierman. And JB, I asked you this. He had a good combine, and it may have helped him get his stock back up to like late first-round status, but a lot of the experts like Fanta and even myself, like from looking at the combine results and all of that, I see Scheierman fall into the early second round now. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, he did what he had to do with the combine, but it doesn't help when guys are there and they're just killing it. And from what I see, I agree with John, and John's probably one of the best in the business. So if he says he's gonna go early second round, I'm gonna take his word, and I'm probably gonna agree with him.
Kyle, what about you? What do you think about Scheierman, where he's gonna fall?
Yeah, I mean, the first round expectation is a little lofty because given the fact that I think he played 5 full seasons or in college in general. The talent's there. A great college player, great college talent, but NBA GMs don't want to take, spend a first round pick, generally speaking, on a guy who's almost 25.
Exactly. And another big name who, in my opinion, I think he's anywhere between 15 to 25 in the draft, and that's Zach Edey. Because a guy like him can move. He can move fast. He's quick. His hand-eye coordination with the ball where he needs to be is amongst one of the best I've ever seen in college basketball in a long time for guys his size. But again, the center position is kind of on the way down, and we're looking more at the forward and guard era of basketball in the NBA going into from college. So, JB, I asked you this. Does Eddie even stay first rounded, or does he go in the second round?
So it's a tough call. I mean, he's playing a position that's not as important as it used to be. He doesn't have the mobility of like a Klingon, who's a little bit more mobile and can move around a little bit more. Edie's kind of like a statue in the middle. Phenomenal talent, but where does he fit into the current NBA? You're going to need a team that's going to want to play a different style than everyone else is playing, and see where it takes them. But I think he's going to go late first round on a team that is pretty solid. So he might not get a lot of playing time.
Kyle, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, JB mentioned earlier Donovan Klingon. I think Edey is a great post presence, offensive and defensive. But once you get him out of the paint, you saw in the national championship game, Edey just kind of got exposed in the pick and roll, and NBA offenses are going to expose that. Athletic bigs like Karl-Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid, those guys can expose that like it's nothing. So I think I wouldn't be mad if a team took a flyer on Zach Edey late in the first round, but it's for a very specific role. Like he's not going to be a 5-tool player, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, and this is just my opinion on it. I think Zach Edey goes to Toronto. It makes all the sense in the world for me. And the reason I say that is because, one, he's from Canada. Two, Toronto just traded away their big. They did trade away Pascal Siakam to Indiana, and they don't really have a star to build around anymore because Fred VanVleet's gone in Houston. Kyle Lowry's been gone. DeMar's been gone. Kawhi's gone. Pascal's your latest starter leave. So Toronto's in a rebuilding era, and I think there's no better way to rebuild it than around Zach Edey and a big like that.
That's
So
a good
anyway,
point.
yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, I think he's too stationary, and I don't think he's gonna fit into a long-term success with any NBA team at the moment, unless they change their style of play. If they change the offense and are running a more half-court set with pounding the ball inside, maybe if they play an inside-out game, possibly. And defensively, of course, in the middle, he's phenomenal. But like you said, with the pick and roll, he's going to get beat 99% of the time. He's not quick enough. So,
And the last part of the combine winner that this is the combine winner in my eyes. I think it's the combine winner in a lot of people's eyes. The Big East Player of the Year, who me and JB actually got to talk to multiple times, Devin Carter from Providence College. I believe this combine got him in the top 10 picks. I think it's got him 13 through 7, somewhere through that range, because not only did he break the 3 forwards court sprint record, he smashed it with a 2.08 seconds. That is unheard of nowadays. It was faster than Xavier Worthy's NFL 40-yard dash combine record. Think about that. So, JB, again, I ask you, where's Devin Carter going?
So, I mean, he has such a tremendous work ethic, and getting to watch him in that tournament and seeing the effort he put out there. He's not the biggest guy, not the strongest guy. Obviously, he's fast. He, took on the leadership role for Providence and had no problem doing it, led his team. They did some great things. I like to see him go 8 to the Spurs because I think, with the culture that the Spurs have, I think that would be a great fit for him. He's that type of player where he'd fit in. He has that hard work ethic. He just wants to play hard. Not much of a talker. He's just a do it guy. And I think that would be a perfect spot for him. He would just fit his personality to play there.
Kyle, what's your thoughts on that?
I could go on and on. I could talk for hours about Devin Carter. I was on this show, last summer, telling you don't sleep on Devin Carter for Big East Player of the Year. He has all the intangibles. He's a hustle guy. He's got the basketball IQ. He has the instinct that you just cannot teach. You see him jumping passing lanes like it's no one's business. Before the combine, people were probably talking about him in the mid-teens range. But I mean that combine, I feel like there's no reason you can say he's not in the lottery conversation, at least. I think, JB mentioned San Antonio. I like that fit. It's, Pop, known for hard-nosed, defensive, physical basketball. Another one that I think is intriguing is the Grizzlies at 9. Obviously, son of longtime NBA vet Anthony Carter. I think there's a fit for him in Memphis with that tough, hard-nosed identity that they bring. A little bit of a crowded backcourt, but having Anthony Carter attached to that organization, I think, is an awesome fit. And then I could see him going, Chicago, Portland, anywhere in that,
I could
8 to 4, late lottery range, I'd say.
Yeah, I like JB's take on San Antonio, but I also like the idea of him in Sacramento.
That'd be fun
Speed
as
kills.
well.
Speed kills. You got De'Aaron Fox over there too.
And Kevin Huerter and Domantas Sabonis. So if you put him on a pretty established team, his defensive game could really, really help out the Kings. Because let's not forget, the Kings were a 2 seed in the Western Conference 3 years ago.
Yeah, not too long ago.
Exactly. So you get him there, he could be the missing piece to the puzzle there. But now let's change into the part that you all came here for the show, the Big East Breakdown, presented by Kim's Cool Creations. We'll get more into that later. So, all right. JB, I heard this on your show when I was listening to it, and I want to talk more about it because it inspired me for one of my takes tonight. Is Rick Pitino not the coach that we thought he was going to be for St. John's?
You know, he's a little bit older. It's he's back in the big time after coaching at Iona. He had a tough year where he brought a lot of his old players, and he was doing whatever he could with the transfer portal. I think it's fair to say it takes a year or two, and St. John's does what they've always done. They play really tough against phenomenal opponents. I mean, they gave UConn the toughest game they had from the start of the Big East tournament to their championship. St. John's was the toughest game they had. And a couple of plays here or there, St. John's could have won that game. Obviously, it didn't happen. UConn is phenomenal. And Hurley's done a fabulous job of bringing in the right talent. And if you looked at the roster for UConn this year, a lot of freshmen out there. Castle did a phenomenal job. Lost a lot of guys last year. But I think Pitino, I think he's going to be okay. I think St. John's is on the way up to win the Big East. I don't see that happening this year yet. I think it's at least a 3 to 5 year process. Unfortunately, the way college basketball is, the Big East doesn't get enough respect. And if you look at how the Big East teams did in the tournament, obviously that UConn won and the other two teams did really well. And I'm sure if you had some other teams in there, they would have done just as good. And we could argue about 4 of the teams could have been there easily. But I think it comes down to money. And that's why they weren't included. Unfortunately, the rights are owned by CBS and Turner, and their Fox has the Big East contract, so it's another network. But with the Pitino, I think he's going to be fine. I think he's excited about the job. You could see the spark. You were there when we spoke to him. You spoke to him. He has that spark. He corrected the wrongs mid-season, and they went on that phenomenal run where they won 6 in a row. And then they were playing really good basketball in the Big East tournament. They just came against the best team in the country. So I think that, and looking at the recruiting right now, they are 6th in the conference as of today according to 24/7 Sports, how they rank the recruits. And that's not bad because, the Big East, it's hard to recruit in the Northeast. It's tough. So I think they're going to be good.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I want to remind people is this is the first time Rick Pitino has been put in the new Big East. Because let's not forget, the last time he was in the Big East, he won the Big East tournament with Louisville in 2013. So let's not forget that. But Kyle, let me ask you this. Where do you see St. John's placing this upcoming season with a seasoned Rick Pitino now that he knows what the new Big East is like with St. John's?
So I think my biggest issue, at least last year with St. John's, was Pitino seems to want to build the team heavily through the transfer portal, which is good. And I think I'll get into it in a second. I think they made a huge splash in the transfer portal this offseason. But it's tough to build a culture, I think, when a lot of your team is from the transfer portal. So you're bringing guys in from across the country who have played 3-4 years elsewhere. It's hard to build a culture like that. But you did see them kind of put the pieces together in late February and into the Big East tournament last year. This year, I think adding Kadari Richmond from Seton Hall is huge. I mean, that's got to be one of Pitino's biggest gets. I mean, I'd have to look at the list, but that's a huge get for St. John's. I think, easily top half of the Big East this year. That you got to expect their preseason, at least expected to make the tournament. Obviously, that's barring any anti-Big East propaganda that the national media wants to throw at us. But yeah, I think they got to be expected to make the tournament going into the year, especially with a guy like Kadari Richmond, who was, arguably first team All Big East last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a really good get with Richmond. But now let's talk about another team that had a big loss to the NBA draft. A team that has a lot of questions whether it's going to be a up season or a down season. That being the Marquette Golden Eagles, them losing their back-to-back All-American, almost back-to-back Big East Player of the Year, Tyler Kolek. And JB, let's get into this. I was not impressed with Marquette that much this year as I was last year. They had a lot of trouble going in this tournament. It was this year. A lot of people had Marquette in their Final Four. The way Kolek was playing, the way he was passing the ball, getting around, setting the screens for his shooting guard and everything, the pick and rolls, all of that. But once he got hurt, something felt different. He didn't feel the same Tyler Kolek that we had in the season, in the beginning of the season, in the second half of the season, and Marquette back-to-back Sweet 16 losses again. So, JB, I ask you this. What's going to be the issue going here now with Marquette now that they don't have their back-to-back All-American point guard?
Listen, that injury was huge. Unfortunately, it's hard to replace player of the year and, you know, one of the top players in the conference. When they get hurt, you're not going to be able to just go out there and replace them in season. They had a tough time recruiting, that he left anyway. They're recruiting, they're ranked ninth in the conference, which towards the bottom. It's tough. And I just, unfortunately, when you're at the top, if you can't replenish the recruits, you have nowhere to go but down. And they were a top two, top three school in the conference. So, I mean, for them to stay where they are, it's going to be a lot of guys having to step up and have growth that I don't know if they're ready for. And it's a hard thing because when you have your guy and they're gone all of a sudden, who's going to step up to fill that role? And I don't know if they have that person yet. And they didn't go out and get that person in the transfer portal. They didn't sign a recruit that stands out that I say, okay, well, they're good. They got this guy. So I don't know. I think they're going to drop to probably middle of the pack. They'll still be okay, and they probably will still be able to make the tournament if the Big East has enough teams that qualify, which is what we are talking about before. But they're definitely not going to be in the top two, top three like they were.
Kyle, thoughts?
Yeah, again, I don't think Marquette's coming close to the top three in the Big East this year. I think there's something to be said for Schalke keeping all his guys in house. They returned a lot of starter minutes, a lot of rotation minutes, but the ones that you lost, Iguodaro and Kolek, are arguably your two most important pieces. You're keeping Cam Jones, who elite scorer, will probably be Big East first team this year. But like JB said, ninth in recruiting, you're not really bringing in too much talent. You're just kind of keeping what you had as much as you can from the year before. So, in the NIL world, it's always good to keep your guys in house, and sometimes the best gets are the guys you just keep. But losing two all conference players for Marquette, and then you're left with guys from the back of your rotation, hoping that they can fill a Kolek void or a Iguodaro void. So I don't think Marquette comes close to the top three in the Big East, as it's been the consensus top three: UConn, Marquette, Creighton, for the better part of a year and a half, maybe now. But I think that third spot is definitely up for grabs this season.
All right, and before we get into our final segment, which will be about the Providence Friars, which I know Kyle is fired up about that, no pun intended. But our next segment, real quick here, is Swizz Shorts. So what it is a short, quick news and facts coming about the Big East and just getting Kyle and JB's quick thoughts. Alex Caravan recommits to UConn, pulls his name back out of the draft. JB, thoughts on that?
That's huge. I mean, he was huge for them last year in the tournament and the Big East tournament. The top recruiting team in the conference. They keep one of their most important players. I don't think anyone's catched him this year. Hurley's done an outstanding job at Carabin. Just, he's got some talent. He can move around. We were talking about Edey before. How Edey's just, in my mind, a block in the center. Karabek can move around. He's got a lot of talent. I like him.
Kyle, Tristan Newton undecided with future after final season at UConn. What do you think is next for Newton?
Hopefully, a team in the NBA will give him a chance, whether it's a G League contract, end of the bench spot. Undersized guys, so the NBA might be a little tough, but it's always good to see Big East guys in the league.
All right, and the last Swiss short fact of the day, which will lead into what we're talking about next. Providence Friars land 5-star recruit Jameer Jones, the highest recruit Providence has had since Chris Dunn coming to the Friars. JB and Kyle, what's your thoughts on that? JB, you got the mic.
Listen, it's always great when you can get a 5-star recruit. Providence does a great job of bringing players in. They're always a tough team. For years now, I remember St. John's playing Providence and saying, wow, this team is always good. They always find a way to win. And, I think he's going to definitely help them keep where they're at. And they're going to be another, 18 to 20 win team again.
Kyle, thoughts?
I mean, I'm super biased, so I try to take the heart out of it and try and put the brain into it. But my heart's just saying this is just a domino, man. This is the first full recruiting cycle that Kim English has had. It's just very, very promising. And there was an old coach who said 5 stars don't come to Providence, but real promising first full offseason for Kim English, I'd say.
Yeah, most definitely. And now let's talk about the Friars here. And this is going to be the big portion of our show, ladies and gentlemen. So, obviously, last season, a lot of people, including myself and JB, because we had conversations as Selection Sunday was going on about this, as did we, Kyle. Providence got robbed. They should have been in the tournament. They had enough quad wins in each of the quadrants. And, I remember JB saying one of the big reasons was because the Mountain West region dominated the selection pool this year. But, you're losing a guy like Devin Carter. But earlier in the season, if not, we don't remember, Bryce Hopkins went down with a torn ACL. Tore it on both sides. I remember getting to catch up with Bryce at the Big East tournament before the game on that day, and he just said he tore it on both sides. It was a lot worse than they thought. But now you're getting him back, fully healthy, and we know what he can do when he's fully healthy. Look at his first year. His first year as a Friar was one of the best we've seen from a Providence transfer in a long time. Made all-team Big East, all first-team Big East, and made the Big East honor roll as well. On runner-up for Big East Player of the Year as well, right behind Tyler Kolek. But, JB, I ask you this. With Devin Carter leaving, and can Bryce Hopkins reclaim that star role that the Friars so desperately need now that their number one player is gone?
I think he definitely will. I don't see it happening, the first 10 games or so, because that's a tough injury to come back from. He's going to have to get his legs under him. And I mean, you could practice as much as you want. You could, scrimmage in the gym and play with your guys. But until you start playing games, it's not the same. And he's going to have to cut and move on that knee. He'll be fine once he gets into it. And, once the Big East season starts, a game or two into it, he's going to start feeling himself again and being fine. But, to start the year, which they're going to be fine anyway, because, the big conferences don't play any tough games the first month of the season, usually, except for whatever preseason tournament they may be in. So I think he's going to be fine. By the time we get to the Big East tournament, you're going to say, wow, it's like he was back to himself.
Yeah, Kyle, thoughts on that?
I just completely unrelated. I hate the fact that college basketball, the good games don't start until about a month into the season. I think that's just a load of crap. But I am going to say something that I think a year ago I would have sounded like a crazy person. I don't think Bryce Hopkins needs to be a star for the Friars to be successful this year. I don't think you need to. Granted, listen, all Big East player, like you said, one of the only unanimous all Big East players a couple years removed. Kim English did really well in the transfer portal, putting pieces around Bryce to succeed. We saw Bryce get off to a slow start last year offensively, not being able to hit shots, transition, didn't really look to pass too much, turn into turnovers. But the one thing that Providence lacked, and a big reason why they missed the tournament last year, was because they were missing size. And Bryce Hopkins is that size. Before he went down, they had I believe it was the 10th ranked defense in the country per KenPom. And then you lose your, borderline All-American with size and can put the ball on the floor and hit shots. That's a big miss. So I think size is a big thing that I think Bryce is going to bring size to the team more this year that they need than the offensive firepower that you may expect from a couple years ago.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a lot of rebounding, defense down low. Kim English brought in a lot of shot makers, which I feel very confident about. I think the offensive load will be taken off Bryce a little bit, and the defense is, and obviously on the boards is where you'll see his value.
Absolutely. And let's get a little bit into this as we get ready to wrap up in just a little bit here. But one thing I want to talk about, because we've been talking about the recruits a lot, the most slept on recruit that stands out to me for Providence is none other than, one second, I just got to make sure I pronounce his name right here, Wesley Cartwright Jr. 18.6 points per game from Chicago State. Going into his biggest conference yet, biggest school yet for college basketball. And before we even get into talking about him, I'm going to say this. I may be biased, but me and JB heard it even in Madison Square Garden. I think there's a strong case that the Providence Friars have the best fan base in all of college basketball.
Tyler, I'm in the thick of it, man. I'm active on that PC Twitter, man.
You are.
is a different breed. It
Yes,
is
they
a
are.
different breed, man. It is a passionate fan base, and Providence is the pro team in this state, man.
Yeah, but let's get into the Chicago State Cougars guard here, Wesley Cartwright Jr., the newest commit to Providence College, because he just pulled his name out of the NBA draft to come play for Kim English. JB, listen to this: 18.7 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and his field goal percentage is 44.4%. Providence is getting an absolute stud for a guard now with Devin Carter being gone. What's your thoughts on him?
So, I mean, look at his journey. He's played at Chicago State, had a great year. What does he do? He goes, instead of going to the NBA draft now, where he'll probably be a second round pick at best and really hard to make a team. He goes to the best basketball conference in the world, plays on a really good team for one of the best coaches in the Big East, and Kim English will be the best coach of the Big East at one point of his career. It may not be today, but he's one of the best right now, and you're going to learn from a really good coach. You're going to produce at a great level in the best conference. So instead of getting picked in the second round, this year, now you have a chance to put your stock and move it up and become a late first round or mid first round pick. It's a no brainer. And, he's got talent. He can play the game and made a great career decision,
Absolutely. Kyle, thoughts on Wesley?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting career path for him. He came from Chicago State, but he came into college in the ESPN Top 100. Like, he wasn't like a nobody who just kind of got a good break and found himself in a good situation. Like, he was highly touted. His uncle was the coach over at Chicago State. He wanted to play for his uncle. Sorry, but like, this is a good talent that the Friars are getting, and it's no one talked about it because he's playing. And I couldn't tell you what conference Chicago State is in. I really couldn't. But I mean, you have a guy who's proven he can hit shots. Obviously, you get to see it at a high major level, but he's drawn comparisons to Devin Carter, which I think is a little out there, not having seen him play at the power conference level yet. But if you tell me we can get, a shot maker
who's also 6'6", 6'6", by the way,
with size and who can make hustle plays on defense, like, you'd have to be brain dead to say no to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to give my prediction, and then JB can give his, and Kyle can give his, and then we'll close out the show. I'm going to go bold here and say the Friars win the Big East next year. I think Providence wins it. with UConn losing Newton, Castle, and Klingon, 2 of the 3 are going to the draft. The other one is undecided. Hopefully he gets walked on. I know he's been working out with Charlotte and a couple other teams like that. But I think Providence wins the Big East this year, man. I really do. This has felt the most complete of a team that Providence has had since they last won the Big East. JB, thoughts on that?
So after watching last year, and seeing Hurley coach that team and looking at the amount of freshmen that were on there on the roster and the way Castle played as a freshman and the style of play that they have, I think they're going to win again. I think Providence probably going to finish in the top 3. St. John's will probably be top 4, and the second will probably be Creighton. But I think it's going to be a great season for all those teams I just mentioned, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm excited.
Kyle, what about yourself?
So this is a big question I have. When you say the Friars are going to win the Big East, in quotation marks, Tyler Sumner, are you talking the regular season championship or the tournament?
I'm talking both. I think they win both.
Double champs?
Double champs this year.
So I would argue it's harder for a team to win the regular season tournament, or the regular season title, just for the sole fact that the Big East is a gauntlet, absolute gauntlet. You're playing 20
Okay,
games,
then let me
usually
rephrase that. Big East tournament, and the reason I say that is because last year they did enough in that tournament. Am I right or wrong, JB? They did enough in that tournament that they should have been in March Madness.
Without a doubt, there's no reason they should have made it last year.
So here's the thing. I think they're going to play with a chip on their shoulder in that Big East tournament and run the gauntlet. They're going to knock out the big teams.
So what I was going to say was, we saw it as Providence fans, 10 years ago in the Big East tournament. Friars won as a 4 seed. If there's a big gap between, a middle of the pack team and let's say UConn, you catch them on a bad day, that makes all the difference in the world. You can catch UConn on a bad day in January, and that's not going to mean a lot in the grand scheme of things as far as winning the regular season title.
Absolutely.
Granted, I would rather take a Big East tournament win, but I think there's less room for error once you get to the Big East tournament. So if one thing goes wrong, that could completely change the outlook of the entire bracket.
Absolutely. So there you have it. That is going to do it for the Big East breakdown presented by the Swiss Sports Show over on YouTube. From Kyle Mcshane and J.B.Ellis. JB, where can people find you once again?
So you can go to sidelinesportsnet.com, sidelinesportsnet.com. Everything there is on the website. You could follow me on JB_the program on X, and look forward to seeing you guys.
This will not be the last time JB is on the show. I can promise you that, nor will it be for Kyle. We're going to be a lot heavily more in the Big East season, in college basketball season, because we're going to be everywhere, folks. So with that being said, from Tyler Sumner, J.B.Ellis, and Kyle Mcshane, this has been the Big East Breakdown on the Swiss Sports Show. Thank you guys for tuning in.